Romeo and Juliet literary terms by act.
Alright, we're starting with the prologue for all of you monkeys out there. This is the sonnet that starts the play. Okay, so you need to know the term drama, which is an easy one. It comes from the Greek word dron, which means to do or to act. And the acting is what makes drama, which is a story told in front of an audience. But it's not just limited to plays performed in theaters or musicals performed on the stage. Movies and television shows are drama, too. So some examples are The Sound of Music, The Big Bang Theory, and Step Brothers.
Okay, so prose versus poetry. Prose is the ordinary writing that is not poetry, so it should be pretty simple. It has complete sentences and paragraphs, but it doesn't have to rhyme, and it's not all fancy. So like short stories, plays, novels are all types of prose. Poetry, versus it is written in stanzas, often it rhymes. It usually has a rhythm, so it could be like regular poems or songs. Songs are poetry.
Okay, so you have examples of an excerpt from The Great Gatsby, which shows you how novels are written in prose, and then a Shel Silverstein poem about a polar bear in our Frigidaire, which is an example of poetry.
Oh, 2 blanks and 1 slide. Look at that, we're efficient.
Okay, so just a note about prose and poetry. In Shakespeare's plays, unimportant characters generally speak in blank verse, which is poetry, and unimportant characters speak in prose. So basically, the more intelligent you sounded, which means that you spoke in poetry or iambic pentameter, the wealthier of a character you were.
Alright, so we have some elements of drama here. The first element, I guess it's not an element, the playwright. That is the author of the play. So Shakespeare was the playwright of Romeo and Juliet. The actors were the people who performed them. Not a lot of females back in the day, so any females were usually played by young men. Acts, they are the units of action, like parts of a book. Well, scenes are easier to explain to me. So scenes, the individual parts of the acts, they change with the setting, time, and place. So like if one act takes place over an entire day, the first scene would be in the morning, and then the second scene could be in the afternoon, and the third scene could be at night. It breaks down kind of like chapters of a book. And then finally, stage directions. The part of the script of a play that tells the actors how they are supposed to move and how they should speak their lines. There's an old cartoon characters who'd always say exit stage left. That is an example of a stage direction.
And you have examples of all these elements of drama on your notes, but the famous example of the aside from Romeo and Juliet is the one where Samson's talking and he says, "Nay, as they dare, I will bite my thumb at them, which is a disgrace to them if they bear it." And the stage direction tells Samson as an actor that he needs to bite his thumb.
Or we could talk about Saved by the Bell, because they have a ton of asides in there. Great stage directions.
Yeah, I love Saved by the Bell. Okay, so Shakespeare did not intentionally follow Aristotle's plot pattern, but Aristotle's plot pattern is pretty famous when it comes to tragedies, and there's a lot of terms from Aristotle's plot pattern on the map test. So you guys already know the plot line, but Shakespeare's plays, each act takes place during one part of the plot line usually. So like Act 1 would be the exposition, Act 2 would be the rising action, also known as the desis, which if I'm not pronouncing that correctly, Latin people, I apologize. But the desis is Aristotle's cause and effect chain of events that begins with the incentive moment or the inciting incident and ends with the climax. And it also involves the complication. Just like we talked about, the complication occurs during the rising action. Then Act 3 is still the climax, also called the peripeteia, according to Aristotle, which is a sudden reversal of fortune or change in circumstances. And then Act 4 is the falling action, also called the lusus, I guess. We'll go with that pronunciation. Known as the unraveling of events. So Aristotle's cause and effect chain that occurs after the climax and it ends with the resolution. And then the fancy terms for the resolution of a tragedy are denouement, which is French, and catastrophe for scene of suffering. The denouement is the final part of a play, movie, or narrative in which the strands of the plot are drawn together and matters are explained or resolved.
My bad. Alright, next is iambic pentameter. We're going to cover this in a second, but you all should know that penta means 5, meter means unit of measure. And she baz. I don't know why again. So, iambic pentameter is a meter in poetry. It refers to a line consisting of 5 iambic feet. The word pentameter simply means that there are 5 feet in a line. Penta literally means 5, like the pentagon. Each foot contains 2 syllables. So if we do the 5 times 2, we get 10. So let's take a look. We have the I am, which looks like lamb. That's why she's
Mr. Childs calls it the lamb.
So the I am is 1 foot, da-dum. The penta is 5, and 1 foot equals 2 syllables. So 5 times 2 equals 10 syllables per line in iambic pentameter.
Okay, so this is important because all poetry and music has a beat to it, or a rhythm, and iambic pentameter is Shakespeare's rhythm. So he sets the beat by making sure that each line of his sonnets and poems and plays have 10 syllables. So each line goes da-dum, 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 da-dum. That's how he sets that poetic rhythm.
And he starts it off with the whole 2 households, both alike in dignity. And you have to kind of stress that second dome thing.
Okay, so an iambic foot is an unstressed syllable followed by a stressed syllable. We could write the rhythm like this. Da-dum, da-dum. A line of iambic pentameter is 5 iambic feet in a row, like so. In faith I do not love thee with mine eyes. So we're exaggerating the enunciation of those syllables right now, but that is how you create a rhythm in your poetry, is by having different types of rhythm. And not every poet writes in iambic pentameter, but every poet has some sort of rhythm that they use, unless they're using free verse.
Alright, so blank verse is unrhymed iambic pentameter. So Shakespeare's plays are largely blank verse, as are other Renaissance plays. Blank verse was the most popular in the 16th and 17th centuries in England, and you should know that the Renaissance period is a time of learning and growth.
But you already know that from your presentations. Okay, so a line is a single line of words in a poem. A lot of times in class we talk about, look at line 5, and then everybody gets confused because they don't know where line 5 is. Lines do not refer to sentences. They refer to actual lines of poetry. So here's a stanza from Casey at the Bat, which is a famous poem. If you look at this stanza, which I'm not going to read to you because most of you have probably already read this before, how many lines of poetry do you see? The answer is 4.
Hopefully you're good at counting. Alright, so the rhyming couplet. Once again, we're talking about numbers. This is the worst English class ever. Alright, 2 back-to-back lines of poetry that rhyme. I mean, it's tough. Shakespeare ends all of his sonnets with a couplet. Shakespeare ends most of his scenes of his plays with a rhyming couplet. So, this looks like 4 lines, but it would actually be 2 lines.
Like it is on your notes.
Like it is on your notes. And it says, I do not like green eggs and ham. I do not like them. Sam I am.
And there is such a thing as just a regular couplet, which is 2 back-to-back lines of poetry, but they don't rhyme. Okay, so then quatrain, more numbers. Quatrain, quattro means 4 in Spanish. I'm sure that the Latin word is something similar, but I don't know it. Anyway, quatrain is a stanza or poem of 4 lines, and here's the famous one. I love my job. I love the pay. I love it more and more each day. I love the boss. He is the best. I love his boss and all the rest.
Alright, sonnet. A 14-line poem that has a structured rhythm and rhyme scheme. So the rhythm is the iambic pentameter. The rhyme scheme is AB, AB, CD, CD, EF, EF, GG. So we have 3 quatrains, and then we ended up with a rhyming couplet. So 4 times 3 should be 12, and then we add the 2, we got 13, 14. That is our sonnet. It's that 14-line play. That's why Shakespeare is the bard.
No, 14-line poem. Poem. Yeah, plays are way longer than 14 lines. Okay, so just remember, in a sonnet, there are 3 quatrains, and it ends with a rhyming couplet, and Shakespeare wrote 154 of these, and the prologue of Romeo and Juliet is an example of a sonnet.
Lil Wayne couldn't do this.
Alright, so that wraps up for the terms you need to know for Elizabethan language and the prologue, and we'll see you back here for Act 1 shortly.